Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Odd Vlog, and straight in with Daredevil Born Again episode 2. The episode is called Optics, and it's mostly about the fact that Fisk needs to now, as the newly elected mayor, start to sort of project what mayors should be doing, meeting various people that he doesn't like or that don't like him, and basically trying to build up his PR to try to win the hearts and minds of the people that he now leads in New York. His main kind of like mission statement as the newly elected mayor is basically one of justice and making sure that crime is being fought against in the city, but doing it through means that are normal, so by police and by the courts and by doing it the right way and not through vigilantes. In fact, there's some references that he makes in the opening sort of sequence of the episode where he talks about Spiderman, he talks about the Punisher, and he references Daredevil. So, you know, he's talking about these sort of street level heroes, vigilantes really, who he sees as being a very bad thing and that actually perhaps antagonizes and creates more problems than they solve. So that's kind of his mission statement as the mayor. That's what got him elected, and that's certainly what he starts pushing at the beginning of this episode. We then move on quite quickly and we get shown this scene of just like this random guy who's walking into what appears to be like a subway station or a train station, something like that. And as he's walking down there, he finds that some guy is being beaten up by two random thugs, basically. So he tries to intervene. He steps in. We don't know who this guy is at this point, but he ends up accidentally killing, well, not accidentally, but one of them basically dies. The guy who was the victim in all of this runs away, and he gets into a brawl with the two guys. He accidentally kills one by them stepping out in front of a train during the fight. And the other one that gets up then points a gun at him and says that he's under arrest. And it turns out that the two guys who looked like they were thugs are actually undercover cops. So immediately this guy, whoever he is arrested. And of course, he's now a cop killer. He's accidentally, albeit not that accidentally, he kind of certainly doesn't stop it from happening. But now he's definitely in a lot of trouble. So he gets arrested and taken away, and that kind of, his story is really the crux of the whole episode. But the episode sort of flips back between this random guy and how he ends up getting involved with Matt Murdock. And then we see kind of Wilson Fisk as this newly elected mayor, and the episode constantly kind of flips between one storyline and the other. So eventually they're going to end up merging and becoming one story. But basically every time it kind of goes back to Kingpin at this point, he starts talking about Vanessa quite a lot. He starts trying to sort of dismiss Vanessa any time that anybody else mentions her. So it's quite interesting. There's clearly some issues going on between him and her. But even in amongst all of that, he still manages to push this PR campaign and starts to sort of really present this image as being someone who's going to change the city for good. Meanwhile, on a different case and completely unrelated, Matt Murdock is in the police station and basically finds this guy who had been arrested as a cop killer, and he's getting beaten up by police in his cell, interrogated, but they're trying to get a confession out of him, which he won't give. So Matt eventually finds this guy, goes to speak to him, and Matt, being Matt, offers himself as being his attorney, his lawyer in defense. So that's how the two end up meeting and talking to one another, and Matt takes on his case. There's a lot of things in this episode that really remind me of the Nolan Batman trilogy. There's just a lot of things in it that just really reminded me of it, but mostly where you've got these cops who don't really seem particularly trustworthy. They're undercover cops, and then they're sort of corrupt to some extent. They do come across more like thugs than police, so there's something about it that's not quite right, but they're clearly targeting this guy because he's a cop killer, and that's something that in that Batman series was quite a concurrent theme throughout all of it. So you've just got these little kind of references, very similar tones and vibes compared to that movie series. But one of the weird things though is that we then flip over to Matt Murdock's kind of love interest in this series, who is a therapist and is doing a book signing where there's a very random character who seems to be kind of interested in like employing this woman for therapy of some sort, but he seems to be really a focus. So whether or not this guy's going to come back later on down the line and prove to be somewhat of a relevant character, we don't know. But what's clear in that scene though is that it seems like she's being stalked by guys who work for Fisk, and it's maybe the first kind of indication that Fisk isn't done with Matt Murdock and that there's clearly something going on there. But we find out a little bit more why later on. Meanwhile, Fisk though is having problems trying to generate this PR campaign. And one of the things that he needs to do is win the hearts and minds of the police. He needs them on his side in order to do all of the things that he wants to do. He doesn't have the support of everybody because of course he's a convicted felon, so a lot of people hate him. But what he really needs is the cops. And the problem is that the commissioner definitely hates Fisk with an absolute passion because Fisk himself is a cop killer, and he's reminded of that at a funeral at some point during the episode, and he's definitely got a little bit of a problem there trying to actually get the police on his side. But he finds a way. Meanwhile, we flip again, and this time we go over to back to the story of this random guy that Matt is now trying to defend, whose name is Hector. They're in court for a quick hearing. He basically doesn't get parole or anything like that, so he ends up basically incarcerated before trial, and he's still getting beat up by police, and Matt is obviously trying to help him. But in the course of helping him, he's also trying to find out who this guy actually is. His name is Hector, but the kind of like undercover guy that Matt sends out to investigate him finds out that this Hector guy is actually the vigilante known as White Tiger. We flip back again, and now we've got the commissioner going in to see Fisk in his office to hand in his resignation. But Fisk has other ideas and basically makes a threat to the commissioner's family, showing him a photo of his wife and son having sandwiches in some bar somewhere. And the suggestion is that if the commissioner doesn't play along and kind of help Fisk, then Fisk is obviously going to do something to make the commissioner regret it. So straight away, Commissioner doesn't hand in his resignation, agrees to stay on, and basically this is how Fisk is going to end up with the police kind of under his fist. So it's still that same old kingpin doing what he does, making threats to get people on his side, and it works. The commissioner is now under his thumb. So it'll be interesting to see now, do the police end up on Fisk's side entirely, or whether or not there's going to be some pushback. But again, there's these references to Batman and the whole idea about this corrupt police. That Nolan trilogy just really rings bells with me throughout this entire episode. We then flip over back to Matt's story, and he's tracking one of the police officers who was involved in the whole beating up on Hector, and I think he was one of the ones that was there at the very, very beginning when the stuff was going on in the train station, who then arrested Hector. So Matt's tracking him, and the music's very tense. It's very, you know, that Daredevil theme tune is kind of playing in the background, so we know that something's going to happen. You kind of get that sense of it. So he's tracking the police officer, goes back to what looks like just an apartment block, and begins to really try to figure out what's going to happen, because he knows that this cop, whoever he is definitely corrupt. He's not a good guy, and something's going to happen. But he's also trying to find the basically the witness, the guy who the cops were beating up, who Hector had gone to help, and this guy had run off, and Matt's trying to track him down, and he's using these bent cops to try to locate him, because presumably if this witness gets found, then the cops will end up being the ones in trouble for beating him up randomly in a police station, as opposed to Hector, who's the one currently in trouble for just murdering the police. So you've got these two stories, but the witness is going to be crucial to this, and that's why Matt is trying to find him. But he's doing it by tracking the bent cop. Flip back to Wilson Fisk's story, and it turns out that they weren't actually kind of following Matt's new flame, this therapist that he's been seeing. It's actually because Fisk and Vanessa want marriage counselling and actually go to see her to do that. Now, we don't know whether Fisk is actually playing some sort of underhanded card here, that actually he's going to end up, I don't know, capturing this therapist woman whose name I can't remember. But it's just interesting that it just happens to be the woman that Matt is seeing. Whether Fisk knows that or not, and I suspect he probably does, is interesting. But certainly he seems to be there for like genuine marriage counselling, which doesn't always work. And it's just one of these kind of weird little more intimate moments where we see Fisk being a little bit more vulnerable, but he doesn't really say anything. Vanessa kind of gives this this spiel about how she's kind of, you know, not really feeling the marriage anymore and blah, 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 you know, all of this stuff. But it's just an interesting take, because you can't really trust that Fisk is there to genuinely save his marriage. It's what he says he's there to do, but it just seems like too much of a coincidence that he's going to the therapist that Matt is seeing. So kind of just, I don't know, there's just something not very trustworthy about it. Then we cut back to the scene with Matt trying to track down this witness and follow this cop. Now, At this point in the episode, I was actually thinking there's not really a lot happening here. This all kind of seems a little bit filler, a little bit dull. There's not really anything kind of going on here. There's no fights, there's no action sequences. There's really nothing happening. There's no changes in the storyline, just development a little bit and maybe planting a few seeds of these characters. But then things start to escalate. And this is where, you know, we still kind of want that pull to bring Daredevil back out and for Matt Murdock to unleash him again onto the world. And it certainly seems as though we start to see the little cracks in Matt's armor, because what happens next is that he overhears the cop basically going and saying that he's going to go and kill this witness. He gives out the address by accident over the phone that Matt hears. Matt goes and sends someone to basically park a car around the apartment block so that they can go and rescue him. And Matt then goes and does that. Gets to the apartment first before the cops do, manages to go and speak to this witness and gets him out of the building. As he gets out of the building, the two cops turn up, but of course the witness isn't there, it's Matt Murdock. And basically they start beating him up, and he's kind of taking it. He's doing that typical Matt Murdock thing, just like his father, where he's just taking the beating and just getting back up again and again and again. But you can just tell that he's holding himself back, because we all know that Matt Murdock, yeah, he can take it, but he can dish it out. And there's only going to be just a certain moment where all of a sudden he snaps and starts fighting back. He doesn't sort of let it happen up until the cops decide to effectively execute him. They pull out a gun and they point it at his head. And just as they go and pull the trigger, that's when Matt reacts and beats the absolute bejesus out of both of these cops. And what I love about it is that you get that proper gritty Netflix violence in the episode as well. Arms being broken and pointing in the wrong directions, and there's blood everywhere, and Matt's just bossing it completely. And you just know that that's the Daredevil in him coming back out again. It's that brutality, that willingness to take the pain and use it. And it's so good to see. And when he's finished beating them back up again, Matt just lets out this very primal scream. So you just know that Daredevil is kind of eating away at him and wants to break free, especially in that moment where you can just see and you can hear and you can tell. You've just got these echoes of his dad kind of coming out, and that willingness to never give up and fight back and just keep getting up. And that's ingrained in Daredevil so much. So it was a great kind of way to finish the episode, because it took a long time to build up. You're constantly flipping back between these two separate storylines, which eventually you kind of figure they're going to converge at some point, but you finally get that bit of brutality at the end, which kind of just keeps you hooked and keeps you gripped. And now I can't wait for episode 3 to kind of see where this goes, because now we can just see these chinks in Matt's armor that eventually he's going to have to put that Daredevil costume back on again. We know that White Tiger is now going to be involved in this at some point as well. We still don't know what's going on with Bullseye. Has he just gone off to prison, or is he going to come back out at some point? I don't know. We've had a couple of references to the Punisher now as well, because one of the cops had the Punisher symbol tattooed on the inside of his forearm. So there's just these little hints that these other characters are going to start to play a part, and God, I can't wait to see the Punisher. I'm pretty sure he's going to be in this at some point. Fisk has got to break down at some point too and just turn out to be Kingpin still, and not a good guy. We know he's not a good guy, but he's certainly trying to be one. And with Matt, eventually we're going to see Daredevil. I just know it. I don't think it's going to take too long either. So with that said, let's look forward to episode 3. And on that not so terrible disappointment, I thought it was a good episode. Just very, very slow, very, very slow burn, building up to that big finish at the end, which then kind of hypes you up for episode 3. So a not so terrible disappointment. And on that note, it is time to end. So we'll see you in the next episode. The vlog is over.